Wonderful. All right. So as usual, at the bottom of the screen, if you got a question, hit the Ask a Question button and I will answer it. Or you can just put it in the chat and I will put it into that question box and I will answer your question. Your wonderful, wonderful questions. But today, so we're going to talk about reading long fiction. We're in the middle of a kind of a series of moving from, I believe, poetry to reading long fiction. So talking about how to find theme through characterization and character. So that's what I'll be talking about today. Before I actually get started with that, though, as usual, if you are not following us on Think Fiveable, why are you not doing that thing? You should follow us on all of the social media, such as Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, and also at actualfiveable.me. Do it. Follow us. You can look at all of our streams and see the materials that we share at the end if you do so. So it's wonderful. It helps you prepare for the exam. It's the best. All right. There's my spiel. All right. So kind of order of operations of what's going on today is we're talking about kind of theme refresher, what actually constitutes a theme, because if you don't know exactly theme, then how are you going to find a theme through a character? And I have to kind of refresh my memory too sometimes. So I always refresh students' memories. Then we'll talk character traits and theme, like how those things generally can go together. And then so that moves into epic heroes and fatal flaws, like how you can actually use a particular character like archetypes to determine a theme, because characters themselves can be themes. I'll tell you how that works. We'll look at some common literary works and characters and how you can find themes, and then characterization prompts, so actual prompts from previous exams that are that talk about character, that are like specifically asking for a character. And if you ever look at past prompts, a lot of them do ask you to find a particular character. So this is a pretty common prompt to have. Hello, those of you joining us. Once again, if you got a question at the end as I'm talking, you can hit the Ask a Question button at the bottom of your screen. You can also just put it in the chat and I'll put it into the question box. But welcome, welcome, welcome. All right, let's get to it. And sometimes I'll ask you things during the actual live stream too, so you put things into the chat so you can answer it. I will remind you, I think I said this at least the last stream, it might have been my last two streams too, but this is something that I always wrote on the top of my board for my students, and it's the phrase, "Nothing in serious literature happens by accident." And that is a fact that is, like, if you bother to write a whole book, then, sometimes you have this kind of question in your mind that's like, well, did the author really mean this? Like, did they really want to put this theme in here? Did they really want this character to act this way? And the answer is assume, yeah, they did. Even if they didn't actually mean it. First of all, it's like Shakespeare. How are you going to know? They're dead, so you don't have to worry about that. But also because once you read something, it's now yours kind of too. But if you go through the trouble of writing a whole book, of course, it's going to be it's not going to be by accident. The character's not acting in that way just to act that way. The character's acting the way because the author wants to give you a particular meaning or theme or moral in that story. So just understand that when you're reading your serious literature, or really any literature, the author wrote it on purpose. So keeping that in mind as you're like, okay, does this character actually mean this? So the answer is yeah, the character actually does mean that, as long as it's not totally off the wall. Sometimes it is, but it's actually it's rare for someone to be totally off the wall than to be like so safe that they're not giving a very good theme. All right, so keeping that in mind. Okay, let's review theme, what the heck a theme is. Actually, I'm going to ask you that question. What is a theme? So how would you put that into really simple words? Like your teacher says, hey, what's a theme? And you can put that in the chat. And I'll sit here and I'll hold my pitfall. This is for my Halloween costume. And like 2 of you will get it. Maybe like 3. So give me a suit, and you can, if you want to, you can even Google theme and say, okay, what is this? Oh my God, I don't remember it. I don't care what you do. I can't see what you're doing. And I look up things too. I'm like, I need to have a reminder of this. What is a theme? What's a really simple definition of one? So we're looking for characters and theme. If I don't get in a little bit, we'll move on to it. But I know it takes longer to type things than I always assume. Well, you might type it as I'm going. I'm going to go ahead and move it. Okay, so theme is kind of a, let me make sure no one's saying that. Yeah, okay, the subject of these, yes, very good. So it's, part of it can be a subject. It goes a little bit beyond subject. Yeah, don't be afraid to answer the question. It's great. It has to do with, so subject or like the main meaning or like the meaning behind it. Yes, so that's super close. So kind of a general idea or underlying meaning in underlying meaning in a literary work. So yeah, the subject, what the heck this thing is actually about. Kind of like the why this author wrote this piece. they're putting a theme in there. Maybe not like, I'm going to put this theme in here, like they're directly thinking, but if you write something, it's going to have a theme. It often recurs across multiple literary works. Yes, and it can be, oh good, very good. So the moral or lesson learned in the story, definitely. So sometimes a theme can be a moral or lesson. It's not always a lesson, but it's very often is. Excellent. Cool. One of the things with theme too is that it often occurs across multiple literary works. So it's not just in this particular book, this theme appears here. It's something that a lot of people will understand and appears in many places. And they're almost always phrases, more than one word. Now, sometimes they are just one word. Personally, I don't think a theme can be one word, unless they're this one particular one that I'm going to talk about today, because it's hard to argue one word. So, and a phrase is easier to put into that kind of context of, okay, this is something that an author can actually make an argument for. So some examples of actual themes, and I'm going to ask you some examples of themes like that directly relate to character, but like some examples that are actually themes. So things like, and these are super general. So a theme is like something, again, that can go across those different works. So love conquers all is a theme. It's something that can be argued, because you can argue the opposite. You can say, well, love doesn't do anything. So a theme is going to do that. Or the evils of racism. You could argue incorrectly the opposite, but you could say like racism isn't evil, which is not correct, but whatever. Or Bildungsroman is one of those few ones that are a one-word phrase, but that's because it's one of those German mega words that encompasses multiple ideas. And just in case you don't remember Bildungsroman, it is a coming of age work. It means, I don't remember the exact translation, but it means like coming of age. So like a story of somebody growing up or learning something. So those are examples of actual themes. Now, some examples that my kids will sometimes give me that are not examples. Things like love is not a theme because it doesn't have an arguable point. It's just love. That's an idea in a text. That's something that it's just there. But like love conquers all is a theme. Or war. It would be something like war is terrible or war is necessary. Those are themes, not just war itself. So be careful when you're looking for things like when you're answering a prompt, you're like, okay, what's the theme out of this? Like, don't do things that are just ideas that can't be argued. You're always going to be arguing something in an AP literature prompt. It doesn't have to be like a super polarizing thing, but it has to be something that can be argued. So that's just reviewing theme a little bit. So my question to you is, what are some themes that directly relate to characters or characterization? So things that, and you can steal my last one. And if, again, you can look it up if you're like, I can't think of anything off the top of my head. Am I going to know you're looking it up on Google? No. Am I grading you? No. So you can look up, what are some themes that are directly relate to characters? Ugh. I've been talking a lot today because I went and visited somebody. So my words are kind of like jumbling together. I'm sure that y'all have had that feeling too, like, oh my gosh. So I'll give you one example as I'm waiting for, responses for it. One of them is that Bildungsroman, so that coming of age directly relates to a character, because you can't give that theme without talking about how a character grows up and how they come of age. So that's one kind of what I'm looking for, a theme that is directly tied to a particular character. And you can even look up hugely. Pessimism often leads to unhappiness. Very good. Yes, you can't have that theme of pessimism if you don't have a character that is showing that pessimism leading to their unhappiness. Very good. Freedom comes at a cost. Yes. So you'll see that like you can look at those lists of themes that almost all of them can be tied to a character. I almost can't think of one off the top of my head unless it's actually I can't think of one off the top of my head that you can't tie it to characters. Some of them are more easily directly tied to a particular character than others. Yeah, definitely. I have one that's power and corruption. So you have to show somebody in power. Remember that a character doesn't have to be human. So it can be like animal characters or godlike characters, things like that as well. Or anything that's like those simple ones like man versus world, man versus everything, man versus man, things like that. Those are also themes that can relate directly to it. Ugh. Or loss of innocence. That's a fun one too. Yeah, and if you come up with other things, so this will help you too. If you can think of ones that you're going, keep typing them up. I'm going to move on, but yeah, keep thinking of themes that can directly relate. And again, at the end, in the last part of this live stream, we'll look at actual prompts that will make you look at themes directly related to characterization. I'm telling you guys, my words are getting jumbled. a lot for the last 2 days. So I'm a little talked. All right. Good old Barack Obama. So this is just general tips when you're looking as you're reading, because kind of what I'm doing today with the live stream too is doing kind of a flip-flop. So the first part of it is talking about how when you are reading your text and you're reading, like maybe you're reading a current book for your English class, or you're reading one on the side, kind of like parallel reading, or just for, it could be for fun, but probably unfortunately don't have too much time for fun reading. I hope you do, but I remember in high school I didn't have much time for fun reading. I had a lot of AP stuff. So when you're reading novels for theme, so you're not just kind of reading for pleasure, you're reading for a class and actually preparing for the exam. So this is the way to do it when you don't have a prompt. So just some tips as you're reading so you can get these, so you're used to reading these things, and then so you're not at the end of the year cramming and trying to figure out, oh my God, how do I tie things to an AP prompt? So you're not having to do that. So number one, sometimes you have to simplify things as you're reading. And I'll go more into this too, but reading like a child. So when you're reading, don't ignore like the obvious things, but also, and I talk about this in a moment with looking at characters and archetypes. One of the examples is if a character is a good person, then the theme from that can be that that this is a desirable character trait, or like, so if someone is strong, then, and it is the hero, then they're going to be saying that being strong is a positive trait, or being strong will help you fight evil. So really simple morals like that. If you see that in a story and you're like, oh no, this book is way too complicated for something like that, it's probably not. So keeping a kind of in mind, you're going to be balancing this sort of like reading like a child, like looking for those simple morals, but it also goes with number 2 as well, which is also, you got to kind of read like an English teacher. Ooh, I see a question. I will answer that in just a moment. Wonderful. Actually, I'm going to answer that right now because that's in a good pausing point. So the question is theme just a topic or is a real life application? It's kind of both. So theme is more than just the topic, because a topic can be something like love, but a theme is something that can be argued, like love conquers all. So, and so that, yes, it can be a real life application. Like, again, the evils of racism is a theme. So you can apply that to real life. Like, this sucks and I'm going to write a fictional story about it, but this is something that is in real life that I want to have fixed. So I hope that answers your question. If it not, ask it again. I will answer it again in a different way. Ooh, yeah, you are welcome. And I see valued friendships can completely alter one's life. Yeah, so that can be a theme. I assume that's what you're putting there. Like an example of a theme. Those are great themes. Yeah. So yeah, going back to this. So when you're reading your novels and you're looking for character. So from reading for pleasure versus reading for a class. Reading for pleasure, you're not going to be looking for this stuff. You're just reading for fun. If you're an English teacher, you read like an English teacher all the time, unfortunately. And somewhat fortunately, but sometimes you really just want a break. But as you're reading for a class or you're reading for the AP exam, you got to read like us. Haha. So as you're reading, always ask yourself why. And we'll talk about the why today a lot. So always ask, why does the author choose to write this way? So whatever this author's putting in here, so in the case of character, always ask, why does the author choose to characterize this person in this manner? Why did they choose to characterize the hero like this, or the villain, or whatever? And there's not always a hero or a villain either. That's just my simplified, it depends on what kind of story you're reading. So ask yourself why. I'm going to talk about some generalizations about literature because these are super helpful, and I'll tell you where these come from and what it can mean, and it'll be here forever and ever for your enjoyment. And then you want to ask yourself, what is the message or theme the author is portraying in this story? And in the case specifically for the subject, through this character, or through these characters, or through how this character reacts to this. So what is the message or theme, and why does the author do that? Those go together, because then you're like, the author does this to show this theme. If that makes sense. Wonderful. Okay, good. I see a yes, lol. Haha. And then, so again, I'll go back to generalizations about literature in the next slide in just a moment. It's just a lot of them, or not a lot, there's 9 of them. And then my big advice, and I think I've said this a couple of times in the last 3 streams, or why did I say 3? I don't know why. The last streams that I have done, is having 3 to 5 novels. Yes, 3 to 5 or plays. So either one. I like plays more than novels because I'm very visual, and I'm also very kinesthetic, and I like to act. So when I'm able to do that, I can remember plays better. But some of you are more visual and auditory and whatever. But have 3 to 5 novels or play in your repertoire that you know really, really, really well and are on the of comparable literary merit. So things that you can use on the AP exam, things you have read for class or things you have read. And it doesn't have to be this year. It can be stuff you read in an English class before in high school, or ones that you're reading on the side as parallel reading. But you want to have novels. So the reason why you want to have 3 to 5 is because sometimes not every novel is going to work with a question that is a Q3. So you want to make sure that you have like multiple themes that you can pull out of stuff, because I always say like Hamlet can work for almost everything, but their last 2 years, Hamlet would have been a really kind of a stretch. So having like 2 or 3 other novels is why your teacher also makes you do like 3 completely different novels, hopefully, or more than that, ideally more than that, but you know, time constraints and whatnot. But yeah, being able to pick and choose which ones you know really well. So that means not just knowing the plot of those stories, but knowing you can pull themes really easily out. You know, like, okay, I know examples that I can show this theme in this story. I know this character really, really well, and I like to use this. And ideally ones, like I said, like ones you like. Because if you hate well, maybe you hate it. Sometimes people are motivated by books they hate too, but you're probably more motivated by stuff you like. So know this really, really well. So hopefully you're thinking of a book right now, either that you're reading for AP Lit, or you have on the side that you're like, I could use this for AP Lit, because I'm going to ask you today, I'm going to show you those prompts, and hopefully you have something that you're like, oh, okay, I've read this book and I think that this could work. Or today too, you can be like, could this book work for this prompt? And I will say, if I've read it or I know it pretty well, I'll be like, yeah, it totally could. So keep those in mind. Think about what you read. You can even type what you're reading in the chat. And so I know like, okay, this is what you guys are currently reading. And I can tell you, yeah, this will totally work. In fact, I'd like to see that. So what are you reading as I'm going on? Okay, if you don't type it now, I'll make you type it later. All right, I'm going to talk generalizations about literature. Ooh, Frankenstein. Oh, that's a good one. That works for a lot of stuff. So these are fun. And I say fun because they are really helpful in both kind of dissecting literature that you're reading, but also being able to look at a character and say, this will answer the why for a lot of stuff. So this is something that a teacher friend of mine actually gave me. And I was like, this is the most awesome thing ever, because this is just, and these are some generalizations. This is not an all-inclusive list. And they are generalizations. So that means that like they can go one way or the other, and you may or may not agree with them, but that just means that it's not that you necessarily agree with what the author's saying. It's that the author writes about these things, and not all authors write about all of these things. Ooh, Great Gatsby, good. Ooh, Othello. I just read Othello. That is just sad, sad play. Sorry if that was a spoiler, but it's super sad. Okay. So some generalizations about literature. So you can think about these things, how they might tie into the books that you're reading. And right now I'm working with Hamlet, and I'm also working, no, I was working with a John Steinbeck, but that was for something completely different. But you could use the Pearl, I guess. It's really short. So first one is, and this will be here, I'm not going to like go super detailed with each of these, but this will be here in the PowerPoint in the materials after the stream, so this doesn't go away, or you can copy it if you want to as well. And these would also be on my wall for my kids to read. Like I'd point to them like, hey, this is what you can pull out of this story. So authors usually devalue materialism. And if you see any words in here that you're like, what the heck does that mean? And I don't go over it, please ask it in the chat. Don't be afraid to ask what a question is. I won't say your name. Yeah, so you might have a character that devalues material, or like says, I don't want these material things, or like, I want to live a very simple life, like you're reading Walden. I'll roll my eyes at Walden and I won't tell you why. But so you could say like this character devalues materialism. So that would be a theme, devalue materialism. As a rule, authors do not value formal religion. They do, however, value individual reverence. So again, a theme could be like individual reverence is more important than formal religion. Your character might be embodying this generalization, and that's how you would pull that. Authors value mutability, both personal and social. Mutability is the ability to change, like being able to adapt, or being able to like change your opinion of something, like you're a total jerk and now you're not a total jerk because you learned something. So both personal and social. So again, a character may do that. Authors are rarely neutral about Carpe Diem theme. Ooh, my question to you is, what is Carpe Diem? You have a fun phrase for this that is not Carpe Diem. Let's see if and I'll go back to it too. So this means too that they are not, it doesn't mean that they are one way or the other. It means that like they pick one side or the other. Like they totally are, yes, Carpe Diem, or they're like, no, Carpe Diem is a bad thing. So I'll move back to that one. Let's see if you know. So my question again is, what is Carpe Diem? If you don't know it and no one says it, you could like, please tell me and I'll totally answer it. Number 5, authors are not only our social historians, they are social critics. That's the one that I like the most, and that's the one that can really go with themes really, really well, especially with characters, and it's sometimes the harder one to see if someone's writing like an allegory. So it's relating to the main thing that they're doing, but it's not quite like, oh, okay, this is a little bit hard to interpret. So they're not just giving us, like, for example, something that's written in 1817 is not just to show us what life was like back then, but it's also to criticize life, what it was like back then. So you might use that character to say, oh, well, Elizabeth Bennet, I'm going to use Pride and Prejudice because I used to teach that as well. Elizabeth Bennet is criticizing the status quo in this in order to show that this is not what Jane Austen does not like, this particular social norm. Ooh, okay. Yeah. So that's one that, or a lot of modern literature does this too, but if someone bothers to write it like back in the day and it's like not going with what the norms are that you know of, that's the reason why they're writing it. In the conflict between the individual and society, authors generally side with the individual. So the character is going to rebel against their society probably. Most authors attack overweening pride, so too much pride. That's a fatal flaw usually. Most authors have a critical tone about war, so they're not big fans of it. So a lot of war stories are going to have a character in there that is anti-war, or maybe a parody of someone who's really gung-ho about war. And so they're making a point saying, like, this character is not okay. And then in most literature, the family is the source of the most passionate kind of conflict. So of course you have to have characters in there that are passionate. Okay, yeah, and I see no one with Carpe Diem. Carpe Diem is seize the day. So if you're, whether or not you're going to like live like you're gonna die. YOLO is what people used to say. I don't know if y'all say that anymore. I'm sure that you do, or I'm sure at least other people do at some point. Okay, so that'll be there forever and ever once again. Okay, so now let's look at reading for characters. So kind of how to read characterization like a literary boss. So different ways, so those generalizations are ways to pull themes out of, or I'm sorry, those are themes that you can pull for characters, because characters have to show those generalizations. But these are kind of ways to look at actual characters themselves to pull themes out of, if that makes sense. You'll see what I mean in a second. So, character traits and theme. So we're looking at the what, the how, and the why. So actually how to go into your book that you're reading. So you're reading, let's say you're reading The Great Gatsby, or you're reading Frankenstein, you're reading Othello, you're reading whatever you are reading right now. And you were like, okay, I have to analyze Othello, or I need to analyze Jay Gatsby, or not Nick Adams, that's Ernest Hemingway, Nick, whatever. And, or Dr. Frankenstein. So I have to actually analyze this person. So what do I need to ask myself? So, and this is for any book. So you want to determine the what. You got to determine what their actual character traits are. This is the very, very basic thing that you have to do. This is not, you would never, I shouldn't say never. You won't just list character traits in your essay on the AP exam, of course. But you're thinking about these things in order to understand what this character is. And this is just as you're reading. This is not you writing an essay at this point. You want to determine that how. So, finding the reasons or the evidence in the text that shows those character traits. So I'm going to go with Great Gatsby, because a lot of people, you're either reading that or you may have read it. I know a lot of people read that like in 10th or 11th grade as well. I'll go with Gatsby. So you might say that Gatsby is, I would say he's kind of selfish, but you might have a different argument with that. But I would say that, so I'd have to find proof that Gatsby is selfish. So that's your how. So the fact that he, well, I'm not gonna, that he, oh goodness, it has actually been a little bit since I've read The Great Gatsby. Why did I pick that one? It could be that when he's not necessarily owning up to, oh my gosh, I'm not gonna embarrass myself with that. I'm thinking of Daisy. Daisy's the one who may be kind of selfish as well, because she's not, she's just leaving Gatsby and does not like go to his funeral or anything. So that would be a how. And then you have to determine the why. So we're going back to that why, and that's where your theme comes from. So why would the author choose to characterize the person in this manner? And it's to show a theme, to show a moral of the story, to show the idea, the main idea of the text is through this character. So by determining your why, you are finding that theme. And you're getting to that AP level. I like how you're laughing at me. Thanks. Oh my gosh. I taught Gatsby several years ago. So it's like, oh yeah, I totally know. I'm like, I gotta remember it again. Like I said, I'm doing Hamlet right now. So I'm like, I could tell you all about Hamlet. Okay. So a couple things that I'll talk about, again, is how to pick out themes from characters, or like the fact that they are a particular character. So this goes really well with older texts, like especially Greek mythology, and that Greek mythology is comparable literary merit. So if you've read the Iliad or the Odyssey, that does count, and you can use that on the AP exam. Or this also goes a lot with Shakespeare, but it's not as much of an epic hero thing, but it can be a hero as well. Or archetypes as well. So universal symbols, those universal kind of characters that you have. So I'll talk a little bit about that. But so let's say you're reading a text that has an epic hero. What does a hero have to be? Like what, or that's a really weird question actually. So let me just define it, because I'm like, where is my question even coming from? So the epic hero is going to be that central figure in a long narrative that reflects the values and heroic ideals of a particular society. So in order to be a hero, in a society, you have to reflect those ideals. So you can't be a hero without having ideal traits. You can be an anti-hero and not have ideal traits, but that's obviously has a different name. It's an anti-hero. So in order to be a hero, by definition, you have to embody traits that a society admires. And the hero is an archetype, so it's a universal symbol. So throughout any culture, now different heroes from different cultures may have different traits, but to be a hero, again, you embody those traits from that culture. And that's what I already said. So, yes, so I'll move on from that. And I'll tell like how you're going to actually use that. So traits from epic heroes, and then how you might turn that around to turn it into a theme is basically what I'm doing. So if you already know that someone is an epic hero, you like recognize that this person is a heroic person. So again, this is a little bit easier in older texts, but you can still see it in some newer texts as well. So Jay Gatsby, not so much of an epic hero, but like Achilles from the Iliad, yeah, totally an epic hero. Or Odysseus from the Odyssey. It doesn't mean that they're perfect. It means that they have traits that people admire in them. So I've got like several examples that would take, these are from different cultures. So it depends on where they are, that like they have different traits. They're still admired by their culture. So Beowulf is going to be brave, loyal, and strong from like old English, Anglo-Saxon. Rama is going to be merciful, loving, and strong. Yeah, I'm just reading what I have. Anansi is clever and courageous. So it's a little bit different from a lot of Western literature. Is like being intelligent is something, but being clever, like being able to trick people, is something that is admired by the culture that Anansi comes from, and takes advice from his wife, which is fun. Also not something that's generally admired by Western culture, but is admired in a lot of Eastern culture. And Joan of Arc is loyal, courageous, and faithful. So you're like, okay, why is she listing all this stuff? What's the point of this? So let's put this all together. If your epic hero is something that embodies the traits that a culture likes, and you've got an epic hero, then you can pull a theme directly from that. And the theme is going to be having blank, this trait here is necessary to fight evil or to live well or to be a good person. So if you just the hero themselves, the fact that they are a hero tells you that theme. So you could say if you're reading Beowulf and you're using that in Beowulf, also is of comparable literary merit, having loyalty is necessary to fight evil, or having loyalty is necessary to live well because Beowulf is an epic hero, if that makes sense. So that's the way that you can use an epic hero in order to create a theme. You can also use that for other archetypes. So it's like, say you don't have an epic hero, but you have a villain. So then my question to you is, if a hero embodies the traits that a culture admires, what is a villain? What are the villain's traits? How does a culture feel about a villain? By definition. That's for you to answer in the chat. Yes, they hate their traits. Very good. So doing the opposite, if you have Iago from Othello, Iago is a jerk. He's horrible, and you don't have to finish the play to even know that, but he's like the worst character. So the fact that Iago is a villain, and he's embodying these traits of being selfish and being like cruel and cunning and all these and tricky, then by definition, that or the theme they can pull out of that is being a trickster or being cruel will eventually lead to your downfall. So just using those kind of archetypal trait or archetypes to show that. Or if someone is a damsel in distress, if it's always a female character, then that culture may say like women are people who need to be saved. But that's the way that sometimes literature goes. Yeah, so you can use archetypes to do that. So archetypes are cool for that. So a lot of times the prompts, I don't think a prompt is actually asked about archetypes, but you can use archetypes to answer prompts. And who knows, maybe it'll be this year they'll talk about archetypes. You never know. Another thing you can use for character themselves is Fatal Flaw. Kind of the same. Oh, a huge jerk. Yeah, I know. Like, it makes me mad reading Othello the entire time. Like, how is this guy getting away with this? Have you gotten? No, you're still reading it. I'm not going to say anything because I don't think you've gotten to the ending yet. It's like it's sad. I'll just say that. It's one of the plays. Like usually Shakespeare plays, I'm like, okay, I can kind of like this villain. I'm like, no, this one's really bad. Iago's really bad. Fatal Flaw. He's got a fatal flaw too, but so does Othello. So you can probably think at this point, you can use Othello and use Othello's fatal flaw to determine a theme. So a fatal flaw, it's also called a tragic flaw because it ends in tragedy, but it's also came from tragedies like Greek tragedies. All Greek heroes had some sort of fatal flaw or tragic flaw. So it's a trait in a protagonist which leads to their eventual downfall. Notice I say protagonist, not hero. So it can be somebody, it's usually a hero, but it's just the main character. But a fatal flaw can also be for somebody who's not necessarily the protagonist, but it's usually the term fatal flaw is going to go with that. But a flaw can be in anybody. But this leads to doom. Doom, 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 doom. So good examples of fatal flaws are things like pride or hubris, which is excessive pride. All of these pretty much excessive anger, excessive envy, but anger and envy is usually not great. So I would say Othello's fatal flaw is envy, but also being really gullible. Like, how can you believe this guy? He's a total jerk. But I guess if like your really good friend is telling you something and suddenly you usually trust them. So either way, he's too trusting and he shouldn't have been envious of his wife anyway, but I digress. And more modern ones, things like addiction or that's the one I can think of off the top of my head that's on here. But yeah, so these don't always, tragic flaw does not have to be in old literature. It can be in something very, very recent. So this is how it can also be a theme. So you might take that fatal flaw. So I'm going to use Othello as your example. So a fatal flaw can appear as a theme. The idea that the flaw is a particularly undesirable trait that will lead to their doom. So because Othello is envious and envious, jealous is really what I'm looking for, like jealous of his wife and like not trusting, distrust and jealousy will lead to your doom. That is a theme, a general thing you can pull out of Othello. Or the same thing with, yes, exactly, perfect. Or like fatal flaws for, I'm not gonna go back to Gatsby because I can't remember it. That's, for some reason, Gatsby's like not coming into my brain at the moment. Yeah. So that's an example. So I also have an example for Hermione, just a really easy one. Because last time I asked, like, who likes Harry Potter? And like everybody said, I'm like, okay, cool. So Harry Potter is an easy one to do. It's the same one. So just an example using her as a character herself and pulling themes from her character. So hopefully, I have a wonderful question here. Let's answer that question before I move on. So the question is, can a fatal flaw be something physical? Yes. A very good example of a fatal flaw that is physical, and this is often what a Greek tragedy has. So you have the example here, an Achilles heel. Yes, so Achilles, the almost indestructible hero of the Iliad, has one fatal flaw, and that is his ankle, or his Achilles, what we know as the Achilles tendon, like right on his foot, and so he is able to be killed that way. Or another one is Oedipus Rex, if you've read that one, is another Greek tragedy where he has both a physical and also a personality flaw, but his name literally means clubfoot, or probably not clubfoot, but he has a clubfoot, like he can't walk very well. So yes, absolutely a fatal flaw can be something physical. I would say more modern texts have less of the physical flaws and more of the personality flaws, or yeah, that kind of thing. I think it's more like we are more accepting of physical flaws than past generations have been. Ooh, and let's go to this question. That is a wonderful question. How could a physical flaw relate to a theme? So I guess that goes kind of with, again, more older literature is going to generally go with physical flaws than more modern literature, because today we're like, physical flaws are not considered to be like fatal flaws usually, because that tends to be rather offensive. Like, okay, people live full, happy lives without having, like, they have physical flaws. But so you could use that as a theme, even like kind of branching it out to saying that this particular culture values strength and values being physically fit and being completely healthy in order to be a hero, or in order to be functional, I guess. So that's one way you could use it. But it can also just be using it in that context of the fatal flaw. So like, one of the things, like for Achilles, like, oh, he's so confident in himself to be able to fight and not be afraid of anything, but because he's not paying attention to his fatal flaw, his downfall comes from that fatal flaw. So that can also be something as well. Like, it's not just the physical trait, but it's like, you are not not necessarily aware of it. You're aware of it, but you're not paying attention to it. Like, you're not being careful. So that can be something as well. Those are the two off the top of my head I can think of that, like, yeah, I can pull that out of a physical trait. Very good question. Because sometimes that's a little bit harder to do. But yeah, I would say that's what happened with Achilles. Like, okay, yeah, I'm going to shoot everybody. And then someone actually found out his fatal flaw and shot him in the foot, and he died. Spoiler alert if you haven't read the Iliad, but it's been like 1,000 years, so you should have read it. Or like 2,000, 3,000 years. So you should know that by now. Okay. Yeah, keep them coming. Keep those questions coming. You got them? Keep them coming. You are welcome. Okay. Back to Hermione. Just being able to pull out themes themselves. So let's say Hermione's not a hero. She doesn't generally have a tragic flaw, but she is a character, and she's not even the main character. I just picked Hermione because I like Hermione. Sometimes I like Hermione. Sometimes she is a little insufferable, but whatever. So you determine her character traits. Let's see, hopefully we got some Harry Potter fans in here, but if we don't, then I'll just list them out. But give me some character traits for good old Hermione here. What do you got? And it can be, I just dropped my pitfall. There it is. Come pick it up. So what would you say? And these can be good, or it doesn't have to be like, ooh, these are admirable character traits. It can be like, these are also not so great in character traits. Witty, yes, that's a good character trait for her. She is very witty. What else you got? Let's get like 2 more. And I've got like 5. So this is what you would do also with your own book. So whatever book you're reading, you're doing the what, the how, and the why here. So as you're looking at it. Get one more. Goody 2-shoes. I think I have that one in mind. Yes, very good. Yeah, keep them. If you want to keep them coming, keep them coming. I'm going to move it. So like, yeah, witty, intelligent, loyal, feisty, lawful good. If you're into D&D, that would be like the goody 2-shoes. Like, not only is she good, but she's good and following the rules, versus like chaotic good, where you're like, I'm good, but I'm going to follow my own rules, which is kind of like Harry, but he's more kind of neutral good, if you go in that kind of nerdy direction. Okay. The how are these traits obvious in the text? So she's witty. You say witty and you say goody 2-shoes. Give me an example from any of the texts that say that you know that she's one of those character traits. And so again, if you're not like, you're like, oh my God, not Harry Potter again. Like, think about your own text that you're thinking of, like, okay, these are Gatsby's character traits. How do I know he's this? Or this is Othello's character traits. How do I know he's this? But give me an example of how you know she's witty, how you know she's a goody 2-shoes. And I'm thinking too, and I'm looking at my pitfall. Trying not to fall into the pitfall. Let's see. So all you're doing that, I'll list out like, so you know that I'll go with Iago too. So like going back to Othello, you know Iago is a jerk, or you know Iago is really cruel because he is purposely trying to, he has a plot to basically get everyone dead because he's mad that Othello did not give him a position. So you know that, you pull that particular thing. So that's what you would do when you're doing the writing your essays. You are pulling those specific examples. And notice that too, I didn't pull out a quotation, because on a Q3 you're not able to pull out a quotation, but you're able to pull out specific examples. So you'd want to be a little more specific than that. Okay, we'll go to the how right now. So you know that she's intelligent or witty or whatever character traits you have. She gets good grades. She's always answering questions. She's got her hand up in the air. She's always in the library. She fights the good fight. So you know in the end she's always on the side of good. She never goes to the proverbial dark side. That's totally different. That's Star Wars, but she never goes to the Death Eaters or anything like that. So you know she's good. So then you ask yourself, why would the author characterize this character in this way? So why would Rowling characterize Hermione in this way? So this is where you pull out your themes. So just for the sake of, so we can get to some of these prompts at the end. So I'm going to kind of go through this a little more quickly. So you might pull out from her themes that she's loyal and and friendship is really important to her. Some of the themes you may pull are loyalty and friendship are more important than being right. So there's sometimes in the books like where because she's loyal, her brains are not the thing that actually make something happen, like they defeat evil because of that. But you can also go with the opposite there too. Intelligence is necessary to fight evil. Harry doesn't get anywhere without Hermione. He needs her intelligence. So J.K. Rowling may be making a point of saying you need someone who is intelligent in order to be able to fight evil. Or a old cliche, curiosity killed the cat, or at least put her in danger. So somebody she's very, very curious. She's always like researching, and she got herself petrified by looking too much into something. So those are things you can pull out just from her character itself, or things that she did based on her character traits. So you can think of, we've kind of already gone over some common characters. These are ones I had just in case we didn't actually go over them, but I've already talked about Iago. I talked a little bit about Othello. I tried to talk about Gatsby and failed, but I did talk about Daisy, and I dropped my Pitfall again. But, and I think I talked a little bit about Elizabeth Bennet, so I can move on. Haha. So now, let's look at some prompts. Hooray! So you're going to do the opposite here. So the last thing that we just did was thinking of the text that you are currently reading or have read, and you're like, okay, how do I pull, as I'm reading, how do I look at those characters and determine what themes I can pull? Now, the prompts, when you get them on the exam, are ones that you have to now do the opposite. They're going to give you the kind of theme-ish thing that you're looking at, but you are having to pick the text itself that matches up to it. So I'm going to give you some prompts, and we can see if we match up. It doesn't have to be what you're reading right now, but something that you maybe have read, or yeah, you're either reading or you have read it, or you're like, I know kind of what it is. Does this work for this prompt? So I want you to be thinking, what have I read that would match up this prompt, even if it's like very tenuous? Yes. Something to remember that I said, I think in my first or second live stream, when I was talking about reading the prompt and being able to like pull apart the question, is to remember that the hidden question is not ever said in a prompt, because they just don't do that. But the hidden question, I say that in quotation marks, it's not really hidden, it's just there, is what is the meaning of this work as a whole? So you have to tie whatever you are writing about into the whole meaning of the text. So whatever you are reading right now, or whatever you have read, you need to know, like, what is the author's purpose of this? And that's where theme again comes into play. Like, the author's purpose was to get this theme. So that can be the meaning of the work. The meaning of the work is to show the theme of friendship is valuable, or racism sucks, or don't be a jerk like Iago. That's not the theme that you want to pull out of there, but I mean, that's essentially what it is. But you just must tie the prompt into that question as you think. So as you're thinking about this, I'm not going to, of course, ask you to write a whole essay today. We're just thinking about where these things can go. So these are all prompts that were on past exams, which is nice. And these are all prompts that I also gave my kids to write essays on. So, and they were interesting to read. Okay. So one of the past prompts, and I don't remember which years they were because I just used them, but it doesn't matter. They were fairly recent. So your prompts are always going to kind of have this thing, and I'm not going to go over it like that either. So morally ambiguous characters, characters for whose behavior discourages readers from identifying them as purely evil or purely good, are at the heart of many works of literature. Choose a novel or play in which a morally ambiguous character plays a pivotal role. Then write an essay in which you explain how the character can be viewed as morally ambiguous and why his or her moral ambiguity is significant to the work as a whole. So in this one, they're not saying directly what is the meaning of the work, but this is saying, like, tell me how it's significant to the work as a whole. So basically asking the question, how is this morally ambiguous character telling the meaning of the text? What's the point? So what pitfall you don't want to fall into is just naming a character and describing how they're morally ambiguous. You don't want to do that. You want to say, yes, this character is morally ambiguous, but how are they actually making this? What is the point of them? Why? So, yeah, what could be so my question to you is, so you can be thinking about a text that you're reading currently, or one that you've read, or just in general. So what's the point of a morally ambiguous character? And morally ambiguous means, it already says it here, like they're not quite good, they're not quite evil, they're somewhere in the middle. And that can be the hero, but that can also be like a trickster character, like Deadpool. Think about that. If you know Deadpool, you know Batman. Batman's also kind of morally ambiguous. I like to use superheroes because those are ones that we know fairly well. What's the point? Why make a character like that? Why make a character that is like Deadpool? Or I'm trying to think of a comparable literary one. Gatsby's also morally ambiguous too, I would say. But thinking about what's the point? That's for you. Thinking about that. I know there's not too many of you, but don't be afraid. That means that there's only 5 of you that you have to answer the question. Haha. And I have some examples, but I want to see what you get, because you might get the problem. I'm not going to be here when you're taking the test. Wouldn't that be great, though? You could listen to a live stream as you're taking the test and figure out what you were actually writing. Wish I could help everybody. I'm helping you right now. Why make an anti-hero or a morally ambiguous character? Don't be shy. And there may be a prompt that is like this too in the future. Or you may have had this prompt from your teacher, who knows? As you're doing that, I'll give you also some other examples of morally ambiguous characters too that you can use. Or you can also type in the chat too, like, okay, again, will this character work to be a morally ambiguous character? So if you're like thinking of your text and you're like, I don't know if this person's morally ambiguous, would this person work? So put that in there, ask the question, and I'll answer like, yeah, totally, that would work, or no, it wouldn't. So I already said Batman. You wouldn't put Batman or Deadpool on the exam. Sorry. Unfortunately, Marvel comics don't. That's not Marvel. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. DC or Marvel. Ooh. Comics, unfortunately, don't work as comparable literary merit, which makes me sad because Watchmen would be really good for it, but whatever. If you've read Jane Eyre, Mr. Rochester is a good example of a morally ambiguous character, someone who's not quite good, not quite evil. If you read Wuthering Heights, Heathcliff would be a good example. These all fall into this character trait called the Byronic hero, which was it was written by Lord Byron or created by him, and then other people created characters like it. But it's people who are had this dark side and usually have some sort of tragic flaw as well, but they're not quite like, oh man, they're a gung-ho hero. It's like, okay, you're kind of good and I like you, but you're also kind of a jerk. So not like Iago jerk though. Yeah, or if you read Invisible Man, the narrator's kind of a morally ambiguous character. He's not quite like totally good or totally evil. He's not evil actually at all. He's just not a hero, I would say. Okay. Yeah. So there we go. Okay, I got a question. So what was the point of a morally ambiguous character? Maybe to make them more human-like. More real people aren't strictly good or evil. Yes, I totally would agree with that. So real people, so you would, and I like that question, like, I'm not sure how to connect that to a theme, and this is something that you have to think the why would someone do, but you did answer the why here. So you would say something like, you actually did answer that question. So you choose, let's say you choose, I'm going to shoot myself in the foot and go back to The Great Gatsby. But you choose The Great Gatsby and you choose Jay Gatsby as your morally ambiguous character. Ooh, we have a good one. Okay, you might actually have it. Oh, I'm going to read this one, actually. Gatsby is a pivotally, morally ambiguous character because he is an honest man on the surface level, but he's a bootlegger. His role in the novel is to mirror a 1920s society, which is also corruption covered by hedonism. Yeah, so you can use that as your moral ambiguity and give those examples of how he's morally ambiguous in order to show that, in order to mirror 1920s society, maybe even... So you have this part at the end that says corruption covered by hedonism. So yeah, you can say that, maybe take it a step further and say F. Scott Fitzgerald is criticizing his society, or even if you don't necessarily, yeah, he could be criticizing, like saying this is like kind of the dark side of our society right now, to give us like a picture of what's going on. Definitely. So that's how you can connect that. Or back to when you're saying real people aren't strictly good or evil. Yeah, you can make that your theme too, or theme, like with your prompt saying that this person is trying to make more realistic characters in lieu of maybe their time period is not making realistic characters. Like, yeah, or to say that real characters can also be heroic, even though they're not perfect, or imperfection is something that is also desirable. So that's kind of how you connect that to a theme. I hope that helped. But what you have there, L, is perfectly kosher. Yeah. I love morally ambiguous characters. Those are the most fun to deal with. Cool. Awesome. That is my job to help you understand. Excellent. All right, let's do another one. I got lots of them. This one's a little bit, I don't want to say harder. They're not really harder than each other. They're just, well, that's totally untrue and I'm lying. That's the English teacher lie. There are some harder prompts, but I don't know. This one's not particularly hard. Okay. So setting and characterization. So this one, you're mixing up two things together. So after all, our surroundings influence our lives and characters as much as fate, destiny, or any supernatural agency. Pauline Hawkins. Choose a novel or play in which cultural, physical, or geographical surroundings shape psychological or moral traits in a character. Then write a well-organized essay in which you analyze how surroundings affect this character and illuminate the meaning of the work as a whole. So this one, there we go. That's directly not asking the question, but it's asking you to illuminate the meaning of the work as a whole. So you're always answering that question. What the heck does this book mean and why did the author write it? So think of, if you can, think of a novel, which one of those things, so it doesn't have to be the physical surroundings, but it can be, where cultural, physical, or geographical surroundings shape a character. Like they make them who they are. And they can be the same books you've also said. Hint, hint. Some of them actually do work. So think about like how the surrounding, this can work for almost anything, but some of them are easier to do than others. I'll see what you can get first. I don't want to name anything just yet. And you can even think of, no, I'm going to have you think of comparable literary merit. Because you could do Harry Potter, but not on the exam. Unfortunately, it's not comparable literary merit. But his surroundings definitely shape his character. Like growing up in a crappy environment with the Dursleys definitely shapes him, but... Oh yeah, Gatsby can totally work. I was waiting for that. Yes, so the way that either Nick was brought up or Gatsby would be the other one to do, or Daisy as well. Yeah, so either any one of those people would totally work for this prompt. Oof. So then your next question, thinking about, okay, I'm going to pick, I don't know who you're going to pick, so I don't know. But you would have to think about what is the point of F. Scott Fitzgerald showing how these surroundings shape a character. I think this one might be easier to tie to theme than the last one. But I say easy, and I shouldn't say that because some things are easy for some people and not easy for others. So if you don't find this easy, it's okay. Some things are not easy for me either. Other examples that I have, and I'll keep waiting for y'all to also give examples too. If you ever read The Awakening, which not a lot of people have, but it's fairly short. It's a good one for surroundings. It's a good one for also a couple of other these prompts. The main character, Edna, is shaped by her society and surroundings. Yes! The Awakening. Awesome. Yeah, that's a really good one for this one. So yes. And this is actually the prompt that I used for my class when they were reading The Awakening when they did it. Yeah. Oh, good. You have for The Awakening. Okay, awesome. I had to read in high school and no one had ever heard of it. So when I handed it out, they were like, what is this? It's a nice short one. So if you guys are looking for a text, you're like, oh my God, I don't have a lot of time. That's a really good one to do because it's pretty short. And there's a lot of good criticism on it, like to look back at it. There's a lot of good versions of it that have critical reviews and fun articles where people got mad at the book because a woman was doing things. Hilarious. Jane Eyre is another good one for surroundings because she grew up, it's kind of like Harry Potter, where she grew up with a really abusive family and then overcame it. So that's a really good one. Huck Finn, that's a good one. That's also comparable literary merit because it's a parody of a lot of cultural things around Mark Twain. Yes. Gatsby I have on this list, and Their Eyes Are Watching God is another good one. Janie grows up in a lot of different areas, and so her cultural surroundings shape who she is and how she reacts to them. So lots of things. So yeah, for Gatsby, kind of goes back to that other one. If you're going to go back to Gatsby again, that if you talk about how he has, or I would say Daisy more. Daisy is shaped by her surroundings too, because she grew up in an affluent household and was kind of not forced to marry somebody, but there was no way she could have married Jay Gatsby. That illuminates maybe a criticism of the time or a criticism of what how a woman was treated, or it could be just like, this is a really crappy way to be brought up. You would say it in much more eloquent speech. Could the picture of Dorian Gray work? Let's see. For surroundings growing, yes, I think so. I'm not as familiar with that one, but I'm pretty, like, from what I know, I'm pretty sure that that one could work. Because as long as the surroundings in some way, and again, it doesn't have to be physical. It can be like the way that you grew up, your family, or how your father or mother brought you up, or whatever. Yeah, it can work. Good question. Yeah, keep asking that. Yeah, so those are lots of them. Let's do another one. Let's see. Which ones do I want? Coming of age. I talked about this one a little bit. So buildings, Vermont. I'm going to go to a different one. Ooh, sacrifice. That's a good one too. Ooh, I have a question, and I will answer this question. So could it be the influence of one person as far as, and I assume as far as the surroundings? Yeah, because that's someone in your surroundings. I would, if you can think of one that's more like more than just one person, but it's a cultural. I'm going to go back to that so I can read the actual prompt again to make sure, because sometimes reading the prompt is, yeah, there we go. Choose a political, cultural, physical, or geographical surroundings shape psychological moral traits in a character. So one person could work for that. But if you can think of one that more than one person, or the person and maybe the surroundings, like the, not physical, like the culture that supports that one person, maybe. So let's say that the person who's affecting that character is their father, and that's the only person that seems to be affecting the person a lot. But if the rest of the culture around them accepts that the father is a jerk and fine, I always think of like that, because that's usually what people write. They don't write about their nice father, they write about their crappy father. Then where was I going with that? Oh, that you can use that as your cultural surrounding as well. Because I'm thinking of there's a play, and I can't remember what it's called. Fences. There we go. So that's a good one for like the cultural surroundings, except a little bit of what the father is saying, but a lot of times it's not too. So yeah, it could be the influence of one person, because the one person is usually influenced by their wider society. Good question. Fantastic. All right, let's go back to, what do I have? What else do I have here? Cruelty is a good one too. Oh man, I'm gonna have like time for one. Let's go back to sacrifice. Okay, we'll do that one. Yeah, you're welcome. Totally. Let's do sacrifice, and that'll be we'll see what we got time for. So this one, it has often been said that what we value can be determined only by what we sacrifice. Consider how this statement applies to a character from a novel or play. I think this is a pretty recent one. Select a character who has deliberately sacrificed, surrendered, or forfeited something in a way that highlights the character's values. Then write a well-organized essay in which you analyze how the particular sacrifice illuminates the character's values and provides a deeper understanding of the meaning of the work as a whole. You see where it's coming from all the time? It's always about that whole meaning. So think about this one. I think, I don't want to say easier, but it is more direct. Like, I have to think of a book that someone sacrifices something. So this was one that I gave that was like, ooh, can this work for Hamlet? And it's like, not really, unless you're talking about sanity. So what are some books that may work for this one? What do I have listed here? I don't even have anything listed at the moment. My other questions that are kind of like mini questions here, so list your books out, are what values are highlighted by sacrifice. But let's hear your books first, and then we'll go to that. And that will be our last one today. These other prompts will stay on this wonderful slideshow. So if you are you go back into it, you can always look back at these prompts. And of course, as usual, all the prompts are available on AP Central, all the past ones that you've ever had since like 1999, maybe, something like that. And then you can always find them on the internet too, other past prompts. So I'll go ahead and say another one as I'm waiting for answers. Hopefully I won't take your answer, is let's go back to The Awakening. That's another one that's really good for this and is actually listed on the list of works for that. So you would use Edna's sacrifice of basically her social standing to highlight what the character's values are and what the point of the work is as a whole. So you can think about a character, or you can answer. So I'll give you two questions. You can choose which one you want to answer to. So so you can either put a book that you're thinking of that this could work for, and I also have a question. So what values are highlighted by someone sacrificing something? So someone who does this, what values of a society or what values of this character is highlighted by sacrifice? I'm asking the question like 14 different ways. It's the same question. Or maybe what kinds of sacrifice must a character make in order to highlight certain values? What kind of character would see value in sacrifice? Which, of course, if you're not auditory, you're like, what is she saying? I'm not auditory. What values are highlighted by sacrifice? Yeah, Pride and Prejudice is a great one. Yes. Yeah, because you can talk about Darcy. I guess he's sacrificing his social standing in order to be with Elizabeth. Yes, I love Pride and Prejudice. So great. I kind of want to watch it again, too. I need to watch the BBC version. I've seen parts of it. Never watched the whole thing. I know, it's shameful. Yes. Let's see. I see the 2005 one. So I like the Elizabeth. No, that's not her name. Keira Knightley. She plays two Elizabeths. That's why I want to call her that, because she plays Elizabeth Swan too. But yes, maybe I'll do that. Maybe on another rainy day I'll watch the BBC version of Pride and Prejudice. Yeah, so Pride and Prejudice is a good one. What are some other ones? So a character sacrificing something would maybe and this will go with the theme, would value something like being selfless. So selflessness. So then your theme coming from that can be selflessness is a desirable trait, or selflessness leads to happiness. Not always. Sometimes selflessness leads to you dying, unfortunately. Or another thing can be like, what kind of a character would see, or like for the Awakening, so that would not be the moral of the story of the Awakening. That's her sacrifice is something that she shows that she wants to be an individual self versus go with her society. Her society sucks for women. So she's defying, by sacrificing her social standing, she makes it easier for other women to do so. But that goes with that. So, sacrificing characters. So as you're reading your text, I would recommend, of course, the things that I already said. So, reading your text and reading like an English teacher, reading like a child, looking for your characters in order to find themes. So pulling themes out of those character traits. And of course, looking at past prompts and trying to match up the text that you know really well to these prompts and being able to answer them. Someone asked me in one of the last streams, like, hey, how can I practice this without writing a whole essay? Some things you could do is plan out an essay to be able to answer it, or at least answer, like, to say like the meaning of the work is this and this character shows this, and you can plan that out. Or you can do a whole practice essay if you want to, but I know y'all don't have time for all that. It's okay. I understand. Your teacher may even offer you extra credit. Who knows? But extra credit's kind of like going away. So I don't know. Who knows? Maybe your teacher's super nice. Maybe they'll give you something. Candy. Okay. We're going to move on. Or we're going to the last thing. Pitfall. So 3 things to remember, kind of like that I've already said multiple times. Any lingering questions, to make sure you ask them before it ends. So when you are coming up with a theme, don't be too neutral in an argument for a theme. So remember, a theme can be argued in some way. It doesn't have to be super long. It can be something super short, like love conquers all. And it doesn't have to, it can be a cliche theme too. It doesn't matter. You don't have to come up with something brand new and crazy and awesome. Like, it's something like, if it's in a cool story, we use the same things over and over again. But you want to make sure that there's something that can be argued in your theme. One of the biggest pitfalls too is like I guess it's just not making an argument, being too wishy-washy in the middle. I think that's my second one. No, that's not my second one. Where was I going with that? Making sure that you're taking a side. It's not always like a clear-cut black-white side, but it is, you don't want to be like, oh, maybe the author is saying this. Like, no, just make a point and say it. It's better. Most people err on the side of not making a particular point than making the wrong point. You'll find out if you made the wrong point if you can't find evidence to prove it. So this is why practicing going through these prompts and planning them out, maybe not necessarily writing the whole essay, but planning them out and figuring out, oh, okay, actually, this is totally wrong. Let me figure this out. Or, oh, this can actually kind of work. And you get used to it, and it's like muscle memory. So, but making sense there. Makes sense in my head. Second thing, don't forget to directly connect character to a theme and meaning of the work as a whole. So always do that. So don't just list out character traits. Don't just list out how a character is morally ambiguous, for example. List out how their moral ambiguity makes the meaning of the work. And then finally, don't be afraid to use characters other than the protagonist to display a theme. So you don't have to use The person who's narrating the story. You don't have to use, you can use the villain. So you don't have to use Othello. You can use Iago, or you can use Desdemona. Don't be afraid to use those characters. In fact, your teacher will thank you, because sometimes they get tired of reading the same thing over and over again. Yeah. Ooh, we have a question here. Excellent. Let's go to the question. So question is, so when you connect the character to a theme, are you just saying how the character is presented and why the author presented them in that way? Yes, of course. I say yes, and making sure that you're answering the question itself. So you're making sure, what you definitely want to make sure you're doing is, so you're saying you're describing that character and how they show that theme, but you're always, that how has to connect to that why the author did this. So and you notice on those prompts they ask the question like, how does this connect to the meaning as a whole? So yes, you're doing the how and the why. The what is that's like your basic planning. The how and the why comes in like with more less basic, more or less more planning, like going a little bit farther into it. Just make sure, always answer the prompt, make sure you're reading that and connecting it to the prompt, but also connecting it to that meaning of the work as a whole. So hopefully that answered your question. Okay, excellent. I like gotchas and I like thanks. Awesome. All right. So that's it. That's character, and I could talk forever on character, but I'm not going to, because y'all got things to do. Next stream is next week, next Thursday, November 21st at 8 p.m. is a Q3 overview with Candace Moore. And I think the next week after that is, holy crap, it's Thanksgiving. So we will probably not have a stream on Thanksgiving. Y'all enjoy your turkey, tofurkey, whatever you are having. Actually, the sides are always much better than a turkey, so go enjoy your mashed potatoes or whatever you are eating. But yeah, next week is not Thanksgiving, and next week is talking about Q3. So Q3s are really cool, and today we talked about Q3s too, so she's just going to go over a little more detail. As usual, if you want to contact me, I'm on Twitter at Miss_Walbach, Miss_Walbach, and I'm also an email, larawaltonteacher@gmail.com, if you ever have a question like, is this comparability merit, or, oh my god, I did not understand this part and I forgot to ask it. And of course, this stream is available on Fiveable starting tomorrow. Yes, I will have it done probably afternoon. So yeah, and all the sources as well. I'll put some resources. Thank you all for joining today. I will probably see you in about a month or so. You are so welcome. I enjoy spending evenings with y'all. All right. Have a wonderful, wonderful week, and I will see you later. You are welcome.